Welcome back to the Moments podcast for working moms walking the tightrope between work, career growth, home, and family. When I was pregnant, I read every baby book I could lay my hands on, including my mom's dusty old books from the 80s. But the one book that made the biggest impact, the one I kept going back to in the moments I needed practical advice, and the only one I reread when I was pregnant the second time, was Baby Sense by Meg Faure. New mothers today are lucky enough to have the Parent Sense app, including an intuitive AI co-parent, which is like having Meg right there with you every step of the way. Like we asked our mothers how they raised babies without the internet. New moms ask us how we did it without the Parent Sense app. But when we prepare to welcome our little ones, we tend to focus so much on preparing for the baby that we hardly think about what is about to happen to us once we become a mom. The identity shift, the loss of previous versions of ourselves, and adapting to a whole new way of life in real time. So in this episode, we're not talking about babies or kids, but we're talking about you, the mom, and the development you go through in the early stages of your child's life and beyond. Stay tuned. Even if your babies are much older now, it's such a good episode to understand and process all the emotions and transitions. Helping us explore how our identity shift in motherhood is Meg Faure, the one and only, and I'm so excited to have her with me. Hi, Meg.
Hello, Madge. It's lovely to be here.
So when we become mothers, our world fundamentally changes. But what is actually happening to us psychologically during this transition?
Yeah, I mean, it's an absolutely massive shift. And I think, for many years, it was just taken for granted, or mothers and aunts maybe knew about it and protected the new young mother. And so it was you were kind of cosseted. But in recent years, we've really, the wheels have come unstuck. And I think this is why there's so much conversation about what's going on for us as we shift. For many of us, we haven't grown up with only the desire to be a mom. We've also grown up with the desire to be a woman and a career woman and to perform other roles, politicians, doctors, and to perform these other roles in the world. And so when we encounter motherhood coming from this incredibly competent space that we've always been in, there is a real material shift. And on a psychological level, that shift is really massive. Recently, there's a word that has been kind of doing almost like a buzzword that's been circulating called matrescence. Now, what's interesting about the word matrescence is that it was actually coined by Dana Raphael actually in the 1970s. Now that's strange because I hadn't even heard of it until about 4 years ago. So it somehow must have come into vogue and then disappeared back out. But it's a fabulous word because it really articulates for us that massive transition that's going on from being this competent career woman or woman who has been fulfilled in her own identity herself into being a mother, which is a complete shift. Now, if I say to you the word adolescent boy, your head goes immediately into hormones, neurological changes, physical changes, relationship changes, obsession with one single thing, which is to get into a girl's panties. Like everybody goes, right, I've got it. That's what adolescence is. Now, what's interesting about matrescence is that it actually happens in exactly the same way. We have got this massive hormonal shift, a hormonal shift that happens not over a course of a few years, like an adolescent boy, but over 9 months. And then the shift immediately after birth, also in hormones, which is absolutely massive. And so you've got these huge hormonal shifts that happen. Our body image changes, similar to the adolescent boy. Suddenly, the things that we thought we understood about our anatomy is completely different. And so we're dealing with that. But the biggest thing is the existential and like cognitive piece around matrescence. And that is that our entire world focus shifts, and it happens literally within 12 hours. It happens very, very quickly once we've given birth to our baby. Now, what happens to our mind in that moment is that we start to become absolutely obsessed with keeping this child alive and attuning to them. And that's deeply embedded inside of us as we give birth and as we start to connect with them. And that doesn't necessarily mean this is beautiful and romantic and bonding at once, but it should mean that we are deeply attuned to keeping a human life alive. And so that takes an enormous amount of cognitive energy. So the things that we thought about before, like how is my body feeling, in pregnancy, or how am I going to get this baby out, or oh, my breasts are sore, or whatever it is, those things almost disappear and become secondary to the one thing, which is how do I read this human and how do I keep them alive? And that means that there is a massive, massive shift in our brain neurology. And they've actually found, they've done some studies and they've had a look at actually what gray matter looks like. And gray matter actually fundamentally changes after a woman gives birth, and it stays changed for about 2 years. And it's not necessarily that she loses gray matter, although in moments she will feel like she has lost gray matter. It's that she's redirecting the energy and the focus within her brain. And that energy and focus reshifts towards the human being who they are, trying to keep alive and who they're trying to bond with and they're trying to understand and navigate. And so you can see that caught up in all of that I've just described is this massive mental shift, this hormonal shift, and actually a massive shift in identity of who I am, because I'm not able to do the things I was before with the same clarity, because my clarity has to go to something else.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so, so interesting. And when you explain it, I remember it so clearly. Like nothing else on earth could matter to me those first few weeks. I was in this baby bubble, and literally when I returned to work, I felt like, how can I ever take this seriously again? Like I'm not the same person anymore.
Yeah. So, for me, it feels like yesterday as well. My son's 27, so it tells you just how real it, it really was massive for me, because I can remember it like yesterday. And a few things happened to me. One was, it was around the time, it was before social media and WhatsApp, and even I think SMS was around, but not BBMs even, it was a long time ago. And so our main channel of communication with the outside world was actually email. And so I started an email once a week to tell everybody I knew on my entire email list about my child's development. Now, of course, nowadays that's TikTok, Instagram, blogs, Substacks. We didn't have those in those days. And so I would send out this email updating everybody on my child. And one day, one of my friends came back and he went, Meg, what on earth makes you think that any of us are interested in him? Like, we're not interested in your child. Stop sending us the emails. But for me, there was this incredible focus on this most precious life that everybody must, of course, be interested in. So it's called primary maternal preoccupation, where we go so deep with our own little ones. But it really is, it's a material shift.
Yeah. So why do you think no one talks about matrescence, and there's so much talk about nappies and feeding and sleep when we all prepare for that, but there's no psychological preparation for the mom and what she's about to go through?
Yeah. No, well, just what I've described to you is messy. It's not nice. Like it's not clean. It's not romantic. It's not the kind of Johnson baby advert about what motherhood should be like. It's messy. And people don't like mess, because people like to be able to categorize something. They like to be able to maintain something. Our human brain works in creating predictable models for the world. Well, now there's no predictable model. The only predictable model we think we should have for motherhood is that it is full of blessings and it's a period of absolute, incredible glow. And so, there's this kind of feeling of, shut up and get on with it. Count your blessings. You're so lucky you fell pregnant. You're blessed to have this baby. This is your role in life. Like, there you go. There's your neat box. Take it. Do it with it. Just leave the rest alone. So I think people don't like the messiness and they like to keep it contained. That's the one piece. And of course, as humans, we like to have a fix. So I can't fix that for you. Like, that's messy and I don't know what to do with it. So don't talk to me about it. But sleep and feeding and vaccinations and when to wean and breastfeeding, now that's practical, and I can tell you something to tell you what to do about it. And as an author of 8 parenting books, I can tell you that has been my approach. I've always gone, okay, this is what a mom is practically asking for at this time. These are her practical questions around feeding, sleep, and so on. So it's easy to go in and have a look at those things, the quick fix stuff, the practical stuff like nappies and feeding and sleep and so on. The messy stuff's not as easy. And it's interesting, Madge. I wrote my books, and obviously a couple of them have become bestsellers. They're amazing practical manuals, and that's been fabulous. But I'll tell you that one of the best books that I've ever laid my hands on wasn't one of mine. It was a book written by a psychologist in Cape Town that was called When Your Blessings Don't Count. Now, it was a fabulous, fabulous book. I think it's still available. And it was about perinatal mood and distress and about what we go through. And immediately she sent it through to me. Her name's Linda Lewis. Linda sent it through to me. She said to me, would you write the foreword for this book? And I read the book and I absolutely loved it. But did it become a bestseller? No, it simply didn't. And the reason was that title of When Your Blessings Don't Count, that's messy. That's something that people don't want to approach. Whereas baby sense and sleep sense and feeding sense and weaning sense and pregnancy sense, that's practical. So we'll engage with it. And that, I think, speaks to something of how we approach crisis or difficulty in motherhood. Let's rather go in for the practical that we can do a quick fix and sort out for you, but let's not address that thing that's really, really hard.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because in the time that I've been exploring mom's emotions and what we go through, there aren't many answers. There aren't always, like you say, a fix, and it differs from person to person, and it's not something you can put neatly into a box. It's very sticky and messy.
It definitely is. It certainly is.
So, would you say, in your experience of working with moms for decades, is it normal to feel grief of the old life you had while still absolutely adoring your child?
It absolutely is. And I think that's the pull of motherhood, that in the same minute you can be overwhelmed with absolute love and want this little one to stay small for as long as possible, and you don't want it to go too fast. But at the same time, you are grieving that woman that you've left behind. You're grieving the fact that you could actually walk out the door without a nappy bag and 10 pieces of paraphernalia over your shoulders. You're grieving the fact that you could actually go to the toilet on your own. Like you don't go to the toilet on your own for 10 years of your life when you have children. And I can remember losing with my kids and just saying, just somebody just let me go to the loo on my own. And so you grieve that human being who had agency, who could make her own decisions without thinking about another person. You grieve that. But that ambivalence comes with a very complicated emotion, and that emotion is shame, and the emotion of I really shouldn't be kind of grieving my old self. I really shouldn't be longing for my old life. I should be loving this moment. I should be in this moment. And so there's shame around that. And that's the piece that no one talks about. Moms don't talk about, like, I'm actually over this. Like, I can't do my 2-year-old for another minute. Somebody take this child away. People don't talk about that. And actually, I think I don't think that the grief is such a terrible thing. I think it's something that parents have to understand that they will feel. I think it's the shame around the grief that I have more concern about, because when we are shameful of how we're feeling, it isolates us, it keeps us silent. And actually, I think one of the most powerful things that we can do, and I've seen it coming through on Instagram a lot lately, is moms saying, I really miss that woman. I really miss those moments. I miss my relationship with my partner, which is gone at the moment, which was shifted so dramatically. So I think understanding that, yes, there's this beautiful life that we have with our baby, and this incredible attachment and attunement and connection and love and the oxytocin that floods through us, that's beautiful. But together with the placenta comes this loss of self.
Yeah, it's so true. The majority of moms nowadays return to work just months after they had their baby. So you were talking about conflicting feelings just now. How do these priorities and needs and identities that don't always, they almost compete with each other, how does that impact a mother's sense of self?
Yeah, so I think the return to work period is a very interesting period, because for most of us, not for all of us, because remember, this is not necessarily a universal fact. I mean, first of all, you get women who choose not to return to work. They choose specifically to be with their little ones. And it's a very conscious decision of walking away from something that maybe they loved or maybe they didn't, but it's a conscious decision. You've got, however, an overwhelming, I would say, majority of women globally that do return to work, either because they love their careers, they have spent 10 to 15 years building those careers, or because they quite simply do not have the economic or financial stability to not choose to work. So for whatever reason, majority of women do return to work. And, I think in that moment, there is a juggle because you expected to step back into exactly the mold that you were before, but you never will. One of the things that happens in the maternal brain, and this was part of the matrescence conversation we had earlier, is that we start to use a section of our brain to completely make sure that life will always survive. And that means that I can promise you, Madge, that at least until your children are in their mid-20s, there's never 1 minute of a day that you don't know where they are, who they're engaging with. You're ticking a box going, if they're little, are they fed? What time's the next feed? What time's the next nappy? When's the next vaccination? Is there a doctor's appointment today? Who's picking them up from school? So there's a piece of our brain, our cognitive load, that is occupied with our children. Now we have to go back to the cognitive load of work. And the expectation is, okay, it's fine. You need to be able to do both equally. Now, what's been really interesting is that for many people, there is an expectation that a woman can't do that she actually is not going to be as good at load 1, which is work, because she's carrying load 2, which is children, so therefore she's just not going to be adequate. What's fabulous and what I really, really deeply believe in is, given an enormous amount of freedom and flexibility, a woman will be able to carry both of those. And there's actually an amazing report that has recently come out from Motherhood Media that looked at, kind of these, what actually happens to women returning to work, and are they able to meet the requirements of the job that they had before. What's incredible is that becoming a new mom actually works, exercises parts of our brains that never existed before. And one of those is multitasking. I mean, we become the masters of multitask. When we've got a baby, newborn and a toddler, my gosh, there's nothing quite like that multitasking. And what's interesting is that when you have a toddler and a job, the same thing applies. You multitask. And Madge, in my business, we have an almost entirely woman human resource. So all of our everyone we employ are women, and I would say 80% of them are mothers. And what's absolutely incredible is what I get out of them is 10x what I think I would be getting out of any young adult male coming out of university, honestly, because they know how to multitask, they know how to prioritize, they know how to drop balls and which balls to drop, which is a very important thing. When you know which balls to drop, what happens? You're actually focusing on the things that really move the needle. And that's important in the work world. And so for me, when I look at women returning to work, the best way to do it for the woman and for the CEO, which is what I am, is to actually give complete freedom and say, listen, I trust you. I believe that you've got the cognitive capabilities and the agency to be able to do this, but just do it in your own time. And suddenly these women are able to absolutely max everything they're doing. So, for me, return to work needs to be seen very, very differently going forward. And it needs to apply. We need to have a whole lot of flexibility applied to women. And when that happens, we'll have women returning to the workforce in droves, as well as having children, because now there's this risk of people not having children because they don't want to lose their jobs. And now suddenly we'll be able to do both, and they'll be able to do it on their terms. And I really feel strongly about this.
Yes, I agree 100%. That entire process needs to be humanized, because it feels like the emotion for the mom coming out of maternity leave, having to be away from that baby for the first time for hours and hours, and doing it again tomorrow and the next day and the next day. It's such a difficult time, and there's just almost zero emotional support when in the office.
Yeah. And what's interesting, Madge, I mean, a lot of people look back on COVID and say there's a lot of negativity around COVID and it's horrible and whatever, but actually it gave us a gift. And one of those gifts was remote work. And for the first time, CEOs and business owners understand that you can get things out of people. They can work at the same level if they can work remote. And one of the most incredible stats that came out of remote work in South Africa is that we saw an increase in breastfeeding rates. And so with all
Oh,
these,
wow.
with all of the strategies that the government was trying to employ to get us to increase breastfeeding rates, the real thing that moved the needle was COVID. Why? Because mums could be at home. And so suddenly she was doing her job. She was carrying all of the responsibilities at work, but she was able to breastfeed her baby as well. And that's a sense of flexibility that can come, through remote work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my son was born in 2017 and I was expressing at work and
Yeah,
I took the My City bus from Cape Town CBD to our suburb. So I had my frozen breast milk with me on the bus. And I did that for quite a while. And then my daughter was born at the end of 2019. So I went
yeah.
back for after maternity leave only for 2 weeks, and then lockdown started, and I
Wow.
breastfed her for almost 2 years. So
Yeah.
definitely I'm part of that stats
One of those
there.
stats.
So yeah,
Amazing.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Um,
very interesting.
so yes, it's very interesting. Meg, are some women more vulnerable to identity loss during matrescence than others?
Yeah, look, I do think that there are certainly women who are more vulnerable to all sorts of mental health crises after their babies are born, and we know who are more at risk. I think one is if you don't have an adequate support structure, women who are isolated and living in communities where they are inadequately supported, that they will definitely be more vulnerable. In that period, women who have got a history of anxiety, depression, trauma, mental illness, definitely more vulnerable. Women who have had real battles with fertility and multiple pregnancy losses or birth trauma, again, also bring it brings complexity. And then interestingly, it was Freiberg who spoke about ghosts in the nursery. We bring with us into motherhood what our mothers brought to us from their mothers. And so this is this intergenerational transmission. And so, I'm incredibly fortunate to have had a mom who she pretty much moved in with my first one, and with my next two little ones, she lived down the road and assisted me over that time. And one of the things that always rang true for me was that she would tell me almost every day what a fabulous mother I was, how wonderful I was at reading their signals or prioritizing them or whatever it was. And that type of rhetoric and conversation became what I listened to and what I heard in my head. And so I think, look, you don't want to go down the road of glib compliments to a mother to say, "Oh, you're doing such a great job. Hang in there. You're doing great. You're doing great." But actually, positive affirmations through the early years really does make a difference because it reinforces that I'm actually doing an okay job. And then I think the other category of women where there really is an impact to loss of identity is obviously the woman who has had a really single focused role in her life. So she has been at the top of her game in as a CEO of a division of a bank, and she comes into motherhood, suddenly her identity is totally upended. So, I think you have things that come from your deep history. You've got things that come from that pregnancy. You get things that come from impacts that come from your environment and your support system, and then also from your prior identity. And I think all of those things put together will give you your risk factor profile for each individual mom. And so if you take those risk factors out and you've got a woman who always wanted to be a mom, wanted to carry dual roles, is strongly supported by her partner who's also prioritized her being a mom, who's got an involved mother who supports her, all these support systems, she's going to do better. And that's, I think, where as a world we need to intervene, and we need to be able to find some of those nuggets and say, this is what gap I can plug for this particular mom.
Yeah, that's very, very good advice. And you sum it up
Yeah.
so well because I do feel in our societies or when we live in cities, we are quite isolated, especially if we don't have family living nearby. And
Mm.
that actually brings me to my next question. And this is, what can mothers do proactively to navigate this or to hold on to themselves through motherhood? But especially if she doesn't have that support, if her mom isn't nearby, or
Mm,
if her
mm.
partner works offshore or long hours, or what can we do proactively to navigate this identity
Yeah.
shift?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you 5 little tips for this one. So the first thing, which is what we've done today, is to name it. Like just actually knowing that matrescence and this transition is a big thing is the very first step. So when it's feeling like it's a shit show, it is, and name it and say, yeah, this is like this is chaos. You don't have to have it perfect. So that is the first thing that you can do to really hold on to yourself, is to understand what you're going through. The second thing that I would say is to give yourself one small anchor to your pre-baby self. So find something that is really part of your identity pre-baby. So that might be your yoga classes that you used to do 4 times a week, okay? Or your hair and nails that was part of what made you feel feminine and like a woman, or your marathon running, or your community service, or whatever it is. Just find yourself one thing, or your partner, your date night, and choose one thing and make sure you can anchor back to it every single week. So put it in. So yes, you can't do yoga 4 times a week, but you can do it once a week. Or yes, time alone with your partner is gone, but you can do date night once a week. So put in an anchor that takes you back to your pre-baby self. The third thing is to protect connection and to build community. And I think, I'm very passionate about this. The village, I think, is the biggest loss in modern society to motherhood and to parenting. It just is. And I often feel like all the stuff we go through, the risk can be mitigated if we are in a village, and we're not. We're doing this in isolation. And I don't mind what that village looks like. It can be, I play paddle. I love paddle. So I saw paddle and prams. Like if you play paddle, join a community of other women who love paddle and take their prams with them. Or Stroller Size, which is a organization in New York that I once was involved with in Central Park. Or Baby Hub in Cape Town. They're there, but find your village and make sure that you invest there. Number 4, lower the bar deliberately. Like have a look at the things that you just don't have capacity for anymore, the things that are not perfect that bug you, and let it go. And, that might mean that you're not on top of the laundry and it's mounting up on top of the washing machine. Or it might mean that you are saying no to Shabbat on a Friday evening or to that braai on a Sunday afternoon because you just can't do the social load. Say no to something and let it go. Okay. And then the final thing is, and this is very important, is try and be very sensitive to what is normal struggle and what needs support. And I think in that statement, reaching out for support when things feel totally overwhelming, particularly psychological support, is very important. So when things are more than just what we've been speaking about today, which is that the juggle is real, when it's past the juggle being real, and this is now mental illness, you need to actually reach out. And I think those would be the 5 things I'd be thinking about.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that could be a whole book in itself. Preparing for your baby, 5 points, 5 chapters.
Yeah.
So, Meg, you you've been working with moms for such a long time, so I think you are the perfect person to ask my next question to. And you just touched on it when you said about the village disappearing or moms being more isolated. But have mothers today actually become more overwhelmed and stressed than previous generations? Or are we actually just talking about it more openly?
So it's an interesting question. I mean, I think we are talking about it more openly. So I think there's always been a struggle, and I think there still is a struggle in some communities who don't talk about it more openly, where people just have to suck it up and get on with life, particularly in really impoverished areas where this conversation is not happening, in deep poverty. Because if a woman has a baby there, she's dealing with much more basic, on the Maslow hierarchy of needs. She's dealing with things like, how am I going to feed my baby? Whereas we're talking about how we're feeling about our situation. We're asking more existential questions. So yes, we're definitely talking about it more. There's absolutely no doubt. And that's a good thing. It does sometimes worry me that there is a almost over, kind of compensation in the direction of kind of talking about it more openly. I think we need to measure ourselves and know who we're speaking to and where we're getting the support from, rather than just talking about it for talking about its sake. And I think I sometimes see that we all see it with an influencer who goes down the road of her life is so terrible, and that's every single post. So I think we just need to be more measured about it. But yes, we are more vocal, and talking about it within safe spaces is very important. However, I think the load has changed. And I do think we live in a different world. And, I can remember watching the Barbie movie and afterwards feeling like actually quite angry, because this Barbie movie was part of a movement in the 1950s and 60s to a woman can be anything. She can do anything. She can be the professional Barbie. She can be the beautiful Barbie. She can do whatever she wants. And so Barbie and Mattel started to come out with all these different, lawyer Barbie and Dr. Barbie. And then they came across a Barbie who they brought out, which was pregnant Barbie, and she was going to be a mom. And she got discontinued. That Barbie came out as, the mother came out and she got discontinued. And so I think that there was almost this romanticizing through the 1950s to the early 2000s of a woman can be anything. She can do anything. Motherhood is, secondary, and, we must have our vote. And more than that, we must have all of our choice around our careers. Now, that is very important. That is the feminist move. Part of the feminist movement has been part of that. And it's very, very important. But what never ever got acknowledged was that the first piece, which was the Barbie who got discontinued, actually got discontinued in real life. She had to continue. And so now suddenly she had the society's expectations of her to be whatever, her expectations of herself, but she never let go of that one piece, which was motherhood. And so now suddenly she is sitting with a massive load. And it's that load that I think has made us more fragile now. I mean, it's obvious. It's basic physics. When load gets too high and tension develops, something is going to break. And I do think that's where we are now, that there's this massive load. We want to do everything. We want to be everything, but we still have this yearning to be mums. And I think what's coming out of that is, yes, people talking about how tough this is, but we've also very sadly got a decline in fertility rates, significant decline. And that's because women are looking at this and going, actually, I don't sign up for both. And she is choosing to discontinue pregnant Barbie. And I think that for me is, I look at where we are now, and I think that we are a real watershed moment with what are our expectations of ourselves? What are society's expectations? What about those of us who really want to be mothers and it's a priority? And that's where I think there's a misfit between that whole woman and what is and the work world. And so that's why re-immersion into the work world is just such a difficult thing. And which is why I say give full flexibility, because that woman can have it all, but she needs to have it on her terms.
Yes, yes. So it's so interesting. I had Mandy Wiener, the award-winning investigative journalist, on Moments, and we spoke about
Yes.
exactly this, how we tell girls you can be absolutely anything at all, and then you have a baby and you realize, this is not
Yeah.
working. I can't be an astronaut and a
Yeah.
mother at the same time.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
Mandy's advice was so good. She said, you can't have everything all the time. And
Yeah.
that clicked for me. That landed, because you can have it all. You just can't have it all the time. So
Yeah.
there will
Yeah.
be seasons of your life where something's got to give, where you have to make sacrifices, where you have to step back, where you have to
Yeah.
be present for your family. And then
Yeah.
later, or maybe you decide it's a permanent decision. But yeah, I think it's definitely a conversation we need to have with young girls or girls entering the workforce, is that it's a very big reality that you can't have everything all the time.
Yeah, the problem with it is, and I fully agree with that, by the way, I'm fully aligned, but there are also times in life where you've got a window of opportunity, and if you don't take it, so sometimes there's prioritization choices, and sometimes that is, because I can't have it all the time, I'm going to pick career now. But we also need to understand that fertility rates decline very dramatically after 35. And so there's this window in which you should be having healthy babies and healthy pregnancies. And so I think if it is on your radar to have a baby in your life, I do think that you need to go, right, this is the window of opportunity and I'm going to move with it because I will be able to come back to my career. We have multiple careers until we're 70 nowadays. So I think picking the thing that you're going to do in the period of time means that you can't have everything all the time, but you're picking the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's great. Great. Thanks for adding that. So, what happens to our kids when we are constantly dysregulated? Like if we're overwhelmed and stressed and feeling pulled into different directions all the time, and our nervous systems never have a chance to shut down, and we don't have time to process everything that's happening to us. What effect does that have on our little ones?
Yeah, so co-regulation is the most fascinating thing. It basically is that my brain is in a certain state, feeling rested, feeling calm, feeling frazzled, feeling dysregulated. And when that happens to me, I will share some of that with you. And it means that if I'm in a calm zone and I'm zen, I can transition that to you. I can help you self-regulate and calm down. But if I'm frazzled, I can trigger you. And I mean, we see this in our marriages. I mean, if I am tired and irritable and my husband's in a great space, he can bring me back towards a little bit towards him, but I can do exactly the same. I can drag him into my dysregulation. And that's interpersonal relationships. It is how our mood rubs off on somebody else. And so it's exactly the same for our little ones, is that when we are consistently dysregulated, tired, frazzled, can't cope, we cannot expect ourselves to be able to get our little ones to be self-regulated. And this often happens. A classic example of this is when 5 o'clock in the afternoon, our little ones are tired, angry, angry, tired, and they are having a meltdown. But we're also at the end of the day. Our sensory thresholds are also low. And suddenly this becomes an absolute perfect storm for temper tantrums, bedtime challenges, and so on, spikes at meal times. So, yeah, I do think that, it is hard for little ones when their moms are constantly dysregulated. And I do think that the demands that our work world makes on us can lead us to feel more dysregulated. So it's also understanding what things are draining us at work, because we know that we've got to go back and be with little ones who actually do need to have a parent who can not all the time co-regulate with them, but be available. And I do think that on that, and I just want to touch on that, because there'll be a lot of moms who are thinking, oh my goodness, I'm always frazzled, I can never co-regulate. But I think the most important thing is to recognize that the most protective thing for a child is actually not a perfectly serene mother. It's a mother who is supported sufficiently that she can recover and then help to repair what has happened with her child. So you're going to stuff up, mom, like that is a given. You're going to have to start time when you can't co-regulate with your child. You're going to go off the handle, and coming back, apologizing, repairing, and being supported yourself to be able to do that, and then obviously support your child, is actually where the magic happens. It's not in the perfect parenting.
I love that because none of us could ever be the perfect mom.
No, absolutely not.
So, Meg, if you could sit across from a mom listening right now, what would you want her to hear about identity shifts and everything we spoke about in this episode?
I would want you to know that she has not lost herself, but she is being rewritten. And that is a different thing. You are your life, who you are. It is being rewritten by your little one. And the disorientation that you're feeling at the moment, well, that's not weakness and it's not failure. It is the most significant developmental shift of your adult life. And it's happening invisibly inside of you. And at the time when everybody's asking about the baby. So not about you. So you are allowed to also feel that you absolutely love your child fiercely, but that you grieve who you've lost. And so as this transition happens, you've lost someone, you will grieve them. And that is okay to feel like that. And I also would want moms to know that there are parts of you that will feel like they are falling apart, that you just don't know who this person is, the impossible juggling that you're never able to quite get on top of, the dysregulation that means you can't co-regulate for your child. But actually, all of these things are very quietly and silently making you more capable. And we're seeing this in this motherhood media report, is that what your baby is preparing your brain for is to be even better and more and achieve more with your life later on, just because of the number of balls that you're juggling. So in the magicness and the mess of this moment, you're not less, you are not a disaster, you are not shamed because you feel you're grieving your old self. You're actually becoming more, you're building yourself into something that is so incredibly phenomenal. And I think that's something that we need to recognize as we become new moms.
Sure, Meg. I got goosebumps when you were just saying all of that. So beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your experience and your wisdom and all your knowledge. This is such an important topic, and we need more conversations about how we can support each other through these identity shifts. To the moms, the fact that you're here listening, thinking, and reflecting with us, that already says everything. If this episode was meaningful to you, please share it with another mom who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you never miss another conversation like this one. Every single one is made for you, the mom on the tightrope doing her absolute best. Until next time.